spicy. Jimmy Garoppolo on there could be a benefit, but have they kind of burned that bridge?
We'll say this. Gardner Minshew is the best backup in the NFL.
I love Gardner. Welcome to 30 Minutes of Football with Legit Football. I am your host, Brian McFadden. It is Tuesday, October 4th, 2022. Week 4 is in the rear view. We're ready to go ahead and start talking Week 5. This is the Tuesday episode, which means we're going to be talking fantasy football, waiver wires, start, sit, buy low, sell high, you name it. I've got a repeat guest, Jonah Gardner of Pro Football Reference, joining us back. Jonah, man, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me back on the show, Brian. It's so great to be here. I'm really excited to talk some fantasy football with you and really get into it. The season's been incredibly fun so far, so looking forward to what's to come.
I've seen a lot of stats about how close these get, like almost historically close. I think 15 of the 16 games were within one score in the fourth quarter this past week, which is just insane. Speaks to the parity of the NFL, which is something they've been seeking for years. It makes fantasy football a little nerve-wracking, I think, because so many of the predictions that we were so confident about before the season start have already been thrown out the window. You and I were kind of commiserating about the start of some of our teams to start the year. But we don't have to talk anymore about that. Let's dive right in. That's how we do it here. Are you ready to get the party started?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's get this going.
Great. 30 minutes of football with Legit Football. Fantasy football starts now. All right, as always, you get to choose. As the visiting team, do you want to ask the first question or receive?
I'll receive.
Okay, so we're going to go right into the waiver wires. I've been doing this recurring thing every week, just really simple. People who tune into this episode, they want all the advice that they can get. Who are you liking for a top waiver wire ads? It can be a single player. It can be kind of a few players, but who are some of the players? I think there's some obvious ones this week with all the injuries, but who are some names that are jumping out to you in the waivers for Week 5?
That's a great question. As someone who has Javonte Williams on my team, I'm going to be scrambling a little bit this week. And one person who I'm definitely looking at is Mike Boone, who is kind of the natural replacement. And at first I was kind of like, it's probably just going to be Melvin Gordon. I'm not sure. But Boone put up some interesting numbers when he played in relief for Javonte. So he had 20 rushing yards, but he averaged 4.7 yards after contact, which was the sixth best among players in Week 4. So He's breaking tackles. He's fighting through contact. He's always seemed like a kind of a solid player who needed like an opportunity. And at Melvin Gordon's age, I'm not sure if he's ready to take on like a full-on bell cow role. So I think that it could be a similar timeshare to what they kind of had last year with Javonte and Melvin Gordon, but with Boone in that kind of second player role. And that just seems like much higher upside than what you can really get from the other running back options. The Falcons, I'll probably put in a claim for Algier in case I don't get Boone, but I'm not super high on him. When I was looking at that yards after contact data, Jonathan Williams on the Commanders was second. And he actually, in the advanced stats, had a really good week, but he's going to be fighting for carries with Gibson and with Robinson coming back. I just kind of want no part of that. So I think Boone is probably the play for me, but I would love to hear if you have any other ideas because I'm desperate.
I have Mike Boone as the first one. I've got a number of this is probably the longest list I've had for waiver wires. But Boone is just such an obvious candidate, not just because Williams got injured, but you mentioned Gordon. Gordon has had fumbling issues. Yeah, he fumbled and had one returned by the Raiders in this most recent game in Week 4. That means that this is a team that already likes to split the running back carries. Yes, Mike Boone is not Javonte Williams, but as you mentioned, is Gordon really in a position at his age to be a bell cow back? Denver likes to split the ball. and the fact that he's had fumbling issues, I think we're going to see Mike Boone opportunities. And that's what this all comes down to, especially when you can get a backup running back on the waiver wire. Is he actually going to get the ball? That brings me to that Falcons situation that you mentioned. I have been high on Tyler Algier since the offseason. I got him in both of my dynasty drafts. I picked him up in at least one redraft and held on to him. Perhaps a little stubbornly, but now it's looking to pay off. I just love his running style, specifically in that Arthur Smith offense. He is kind of that bruiser, breaking tackles, taking contact on running back that Smith had in Tennessee with Derrick Henry. He doesn't have the pure breakaway speed that Henry has, but he's that bruising style that really works for that Arthur Smith play action offense. And we've actually seen the Falcons' offensive line has been one of the best. I think one of the advanced stats I saw is they were at either number 1 or in the top 3 in yards before contact, which really speaks to the offensive line more than the running backs itself. That's promising. Yes, the Browns had some injured players, but the Browns have historically been pretty good against the run. The fact that that Falcons offensive line was able to push them off, and now we've got Cordero Patterson out at least 4 weeks. Yes, Caleb Huntley looked good too, but Algier was the 5th round versus Caleb was a free agent rookie. So the draft stock is there. I like the opportunity. A few more names to throw out. And then we do already have a question in the chat, which, by the way, guys, forgot to mention off the top, if you want to ask questions, we will get them as we go. If you have start sit questions, sell high, buy low, any of those things. A few more names to keep in mind. Nyheim Hines, which may or may not be available on your waiver wire, so that's one thing to note. But Jonathan Taylor, we are now on Tuesday. Jonathan Taylor would have been listed as a non-participant. The Colts didn't actually practice or didn't have media present. Even if Taylor does play, he's not going to be at 100%. Hines has a role in that offense, even if Taylor does play, but I think they're going to be giving Hines the ball more. Phillip Lindsay's going to get activated, but I think Hines is the guy, especially in PPR formats. Rachaad White actually got goal line work for the Bucs, and he caught 5 passes from Tom Brady. We all know how much Tom Brady loves these receiving running backs, so like Rachaad White. Khalil Shakir in Buffalo. Gabe Davis is coming off an injury. Jamison Crowder just broke his leg, and Isaiah McKenzie suffered a concussion. He should be ready to go, but the point is Shakir looked good in limited games. A few more names. You mentioned Brian Robinson coming back, might get on the active roster for this weekend. And how about Kenny Pickett in the 2 quarterback leagues? I mean, he's officially named the starter today. Let's get to a couple viewer questions here. We'll start with Takaido Luna. Always nice to see you in the chat. Should I sell Hockenson? So TJ Hockenson off a monster game, over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Seahawks. I'll let you start with this one, Jonah.
That's a great question. My approach when I'm looking at these trades is kind of like it obviously depends on what you can get. I think with Hawkinson's case, it's going to be a little transparent if you try to sell high on him right now. His first 3 weeks were not very impressive at all. And so he has obviously the huge breakout last week. I think your best bet is probably to hold and see. I think that if he reverts back to form, you're really not going to be missing out on a great trade. Probably there's probably not much you could get for him that would really blow you away. And on the other hand, if he puts up another big week, or even like kind of like decent starter numbers for a couple more weeks, his value is going to be much higher than I think it is now. So for me, it's a hold. But again, that depends on like if you're playing with someone who is desperate for a tight end, especially I always try to look at the teams that are kind of like 0-4, 1-3. This is kind of the time where it's like do or die. So if it's an obvious hole where it's like they're a tight end away from getting back into the race, then I would maybe broach the topic with them. But by and large, I think that as kind of an asset to trade, I think I would hold.
Yeah, unless you can get a monster haul from him. The reason I'm agreeing with you is tight end is so thin. To have not just a reliable tight end, but someone who has this ceiling, say what you want about whether he can do this again, but we've seen his ceiling, especially if Amon-Ra St. Brown misses more time. this is a go-to target in a very, very prolific offense that is also needing to score points because their defense is absolutely dreadful. It's just a recipe for success, and because the tight end position is so limited, everybody thought Kyle Pitts was going to be a slam dunk, and he's actually been, as far as from a fantasy productive, one of the worst tight ends this year. So I would hold on to Hockenson. There's just not a lot of good options out there at the tight end position, and one of the key advantages you can get in fantasy football is to get an elite player at a position of scarcity. So yes, it's great to have an elite wide receiver, but is that elite wide receiver that much better than the field when receiver is so incredibly deep? But if you can get a tight end where there's really only like maybe 3 to 4 solid elite tight ends, at least through 4 weeks of the season, and Hockenson after this week is one of those, unless you get an absolute king's ransom, I'm going to hold on that. All right, let's go to, we have a trade question. Tyson Carter says, should I trade Dalvin Cook and Jaylen Waddle for Najee Harris and Mark Andrews? Interesting. So we've got running back, wide receiver for running back and tight end. Current tight end is Darren Waller, who I do not trust. This is Tyson here. Wide receiver depth, I love it. He knows that. Give us the whole roster. Give us the breakdown. Wide receiver depth is CeeDee Lamb, who's really coming on. Jamar Chase, Chris Godwin, and I'm guessing that's Garrett Wilson. 12-team, half-point PPR, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. Jonah, your thoughts here?
That's an interesting trade. I feel like you're giving up a little too much there.
Quickly, I'm going to mention he actually put later in the chat, and we'll come back. His other running backs are Saquon Barkley, Cordell Patterson, as we mentioned, now on injured reserve, Kareem Hunt, and Alexander Madison.
Yeah, so you could probably piece it together there. I think the thing that concerns me about Najee, it's less like obviously the Steelers have looked like a total mess on offense. I can't imagine it's going to be as bad with Pickett, but they are going into an absolutely brutal stretch of schedule. They have probably this next 7 weeks are like the toughest any team is going to face this year. I know they have the Bills on there. I think they have the Bucks too. Maybe I feel like every difficult team that you don't want to play, they're about to play. So that's going to be tough. Najee's battling injury, which obviously Dalvin Cook is too. So maybe that's a wash. But for me, it's just a little concerning that downgrade, especially if Cook can tough it out. I know he's got injury issues, and you do have Madison. So I don't know. Maybe I'm talking myself into it, but it just seems like a pretty steep price to pay. Even though, like we said, that like you were saying, having an elite tight end is an insanely valuable thing. But I don't know. What would you do in this situation?
Yeah, I'm going to break it down here. So we got Dalvin Cook, who I know hasn't been all that productive, and was on a down season last year. But Cook is one of the running backs I was high on this offseason because the reason he didn't produce last year was not opportunity and it's not talent. It was because he only scored 3 touchdowns, whereas he's normally scoring 9 to 10. Like, that's his baseline. Look back to Sunday in London. He had over 20 carries for, I think, like 85 yards, fairly efficient, but it was Madison who got the touchdown. The point is that's not something that's sustainable. That they're not going to take Dalvin Cook out. Cook's going to break some runs. He is due for what we call touchdown regression. Doesn't mean getting worse, meaning regressing to the mean. He is due for some touchdowns that's going to bump up his points. On the other hand, completely agree with Jonah's take on Najee Harris. This is an offense that has shown it has to pass because it's going to be playing from behind. The defense has not been good at all with TJ Watt out. The offensive line has not been good to open holes for running back Najee Harris, who, as you mentioned, is actually dealing with multiple injuries. He's playing, but he's not as efficient as he was last year. And guess what? Last year, he wasn't all that efficient anyway. If you look at some of the advanced metrics, most of his production was volume-driven. This was one of my arguments for why I wasn't as high on Kamara this year. If your running back is volume-driven, now granted, if you can guarantee that volume, that's one thing, but this isn't a team that's playing from ahead and is giving him 25 carries a game. So that volume goes away. The efficiency is already not looking good. So that's a pretty big drop-off in my eyes from Cook to Najee. Waddle has shown this offense is going to be putting up points. I like him. Yes, I love Andrews, but I don't think there's a big enough drop-off from Waller. I think Waller also is due for some touchdown regression. And the fact that you have Saquon, if Cook starts scoring touchdowns, if you can pair Cook and Saquon as thin as the running back position is. So I'm going to say I would hold on this and not make that particular trade.
What do you think about, before we move on, what do you think about one of the other wide receivers in there, subbing them in for Waddle? Because it's that feels like maybe where you can make up some of the value, but I'm not sure if I would be ready to roll the dice on selling high for Wilson. I'm not sure if I'd take it on the other side if it's Godwin in there, but I don't know. Just to try to help Tyson out, if you, how do you feel about either of those ideas?
I don't know. I know CD's playing well, but I'd almost rather keep Waddle than CD Lamb. I just don't know that is sustainable. That Cowboys offense, the strength of that Cowboys team is their defense. So I don't know that Waddle has the capability to go off for 150 yards and a touchdown or two just because of how prolific and the way that Mike McDaniel's offense works, yards after the catch, get these fast guys in space. He's already shown that. Garrett Wilson, if this is redraft and not, that I think that Jets offense is capped. So if somebody likes that, Wilson potential, you could throw him in there. Half point PPR to Godwin. If they go on the name based on Godwin, because he has not looked great coming off that injury. Good question. Those are probably some of the guys I would get in. We got 1 minute left. I want to address one more question before we get to halftime. No one, Knowone, I like the name there, asks, should I trade Keenan Allen for DeAndre Hopkins? Quickly, Jonah.
I'm curious what you think about this one, Brian, because I know you're more up to date on kind of the news, like injury side of it. For me, I feel like the Chargers, this is not good statistical analysis. They just have a weird vibes right now. So do the Cardinals, obviously, but I feel a little more confident in Kyler going forward with, there's all the Herbert injury stuff. The Chargers are losing players left and right. So from that perspective, I can see rolling the dice there. But to me, it's really a matter of like, how soon do we think Keenan Allen is gonna come back healthy?
I'm going to wait to address this to after halftime because we are right at the chime. Tells us we're at halftime. So hang on, no one. We will address that after the half. Quickly, because Joni's got some exciting updates from Pro Football Reference and Stathead. Reminder, as always, guys, if you're not already subscribed, go to legitfootball.com, hit that join button, enter your email address, and join for free. You're going to get the top 6 stories from around the NFL. We break down what you need to know. You don't need to read these long articles. We're going to tell you what you need to know in 5 minutes or less every single day, delivered to you. You don't even have to go searching for it. And we have a really good rundown at the end of all the injury updates for all positions, not just fantasy positions. So offensive line, defensive line, you name it, any injury that's important to the NFL, we're going to bring to you. And you might see some cool trivia in there attached to Stathead. We had something in there today. We had it every day last month. So you really get some cool information, and you get to see how up to date you are on some of the trends we're seeing in the statistical area. On that note, Jonah, tell us what exciting things are happening with Stathead.
Yeah, a lot of exciting stuff is happening with Stathead. Also, I just want to say I read Legit Football every day. It's the best way to keep up with what's going on in the league, and certainly if you're a fantasy player, which I assume you are if you're listening or watching today.
Should hope so, yeah.
That is a vital piece of my start sit, weekly kind of calculation, how I'm going to play the waiver wire, how I'm going to play the week. So I can't recommend the newsletter highly enough. I love reading it. As far as what we're working on, I'm from Pro Football Reference, which is the sort of statistics website that I assume a lot of you have probably been to. Certainly if you've Googled Aaron Rodgers stats at some point, you've probably been to our site. We are just launching a big, exciting new update to our sort of premium subscription service, which is called Stathead. And it's basically like Pro Football Reference Plus, where you can take a lot of the stats that are on PFR and do more in-depth research with them. So what we just did was we just added a bunch of advanced statistics to Stathead. So now you can look up stuff like air yards, RPO and play action yards, pressure rates, stuff for quarterbacks like bad throw rate or on target rate. For wide receivers, you can look up ADOT or yards after the catch. For running backs, we've got stuff like broken tackles, yards after contact, yards before contact. All kinds of great new advanced stats. There's even defensive stuff if you want to see hurries and knockdowns for pass rushers or the passer rating that's being allowed by defenders on defensive backs on passes. You can see all of that stuff in Stathead, and not just like a season-long leaderboard, but you can look up week by week. You can compare this season's stats to last year's stats and stuff like that. So probably in the second half, I'll break out some of the stats and information that I found kind of playing around with this feature, but it's brand new. We literally just launched it maybe an hour ago on the site. So we're really excited about it. We also launched a podcast if you're interested in sports history and kind of quirky stories and interesting stories from the history of sports. One of our data developers came up with the idea to do a podcast about some of the interesting stuff that she finds while doing research, or that the rest of the team finds while doing research. So it's called For Your Reference, and it's available wherever you get podcasts. The first episode just dropped today, and it's about how military baseball teams offered sort of a unique opportunity to Black baseball players during World War II to earn a living and play the game. It's a really fascinating story, and we have a bunch of fascinating stories from a wide range of things, both modern and historical, coming up in the weeks ahead. So it's a really fun podcast. It's a really good listen. If you like sports, I definitely recommend it.
Awesome. And these advanced metrics in particular from Stathead, especially the ones they just released, really good for finding buy low candidates. And we're going to talk about buy low candidates in the second half here, because you can see some of those average, depth of target things where these guys who are getting opportunities but haven't quite capitalized yet really can help you in your fantasy leagues. So let's use that to go right into the second half. I want to bring back up no one's question, because I want to address this. Should I trade Keenan Allen for DeAndre Hopkins? So DeAndre Hopkins is out 6 games. They've played 4. And then I believe they have the bye after that. So I'm not sure he's back until week 8. But either way, you'll miss one game for him. But here's the thing. I think Hopkins can be a league winner. If you have a competitive team and you're right there and you know that most likely, whether you have Allen or not, you're going to be in the playoffs. When DeAndre Hopkins is in, Kyler Murray hyper targets him. He'll throw to him 15 times a game regardless. We've seen this Cardinals offense struggle without him. Yes, Marquise Brown is really looking like a nice piece, but Marquise Brown works great as a complementary piece. If Hopkins can take away the coverage and Hollywood Brown's running around, that offense will look better, but Hopkins will get plenty of red zone targets. He will get targeted a lot. He's talented enough to be the kind of player that adds to your roster in the second half. Keenan Allen, also a fantastic wide receiver, but is dealing with injuries. It's looking like he is on track to play, which is good, but Herbert has shown that he really likes to spread the ball around. We've seen Mike Williams get involved. Gerald Everett actually looking, like a viable fantasy asset. And of course, Austin Eckler, who scored 3 touchdowns, including 2 receiving touchdowns this past week. I like this. If you can get DeAndre Hopkins for Keenan Allen, you haven't missed Keenan Allen. He's been out the past 2 games anyway. I would say yes, no one, go ahead and move forward with that trade. All right, so I don't remember who asked the questions last. I think you need to ask me. Ask me a question. We'll go there.
Yeah, I guess my question is, as we were talking about this before the show, but as someone with Kyle Pitts, just how freaked out should I be right now?
I've got Kyle. I got lots of shares of Kyle Pitts. I think you need to be fairly freaked out. I think we have enough data at this point that, especially this past week, because it wasn't even just Kyle Pitts. Like Drake London wasn't involved. Like they were ground and pound. And I think if that continues to be the way that the Falcons can win, and good for them from a football perspective, I like this Falcons team. They're frisky. We will probably see weeks where Pitts is productive like he was last week. Still no touchdowns, but he had 5 catches for 87 yards. Like in this tight end landscape, that's a really solid week. We'll have weeks like that, but I don't think we'll see that every week. I just think that Arthur Smith is going to run this offense with whatever's most efficient, with the emergence of Drake London as a viable target. You still got Marcus Mariota, so it's not even like you have high-level elite quarterback play. If you can get a nice haul for Pitts at this point and get a guy who at least has a better floor for the tight end position, I'm recommending moving on. I'm going to be doing the same thing. There are people in my leagues who probably listen to this podcast who are like, okay, I'm going to take advantage. You know what? Come on, bring it. I'm ready to get rid of Pitts. I still want a good, something for him in return. He still has the capability to be a tight end 1 in any given week. But yes, you have the right to be a little panicked. Is that lining up with your instincts, Jonah?
Yeah, so I was doing a deep dive before we started just on the Falcons offense because it's very confusing to me. And it seems like what we're seeing from Arthur Smith is kind of the same version of like that first season of like Tannehill and Derrick Henry, and I think maybe like rookie AJ Brown, where it was like pound the ball, pound the rock, and then use play action for a deep pass. And so kind of looking at the stats, and Stathead kind of confirmed some of that stuff. So Marcus Mariota is averaging 10.8 intended air yards per attempt. That's the third highest intended air yards in our database right now since 2018. The first is Jameis this year, and the second was Josh Allen back in 2018 before he was all caps Josh Allen when he was
slinging it.
Yeah. Not sure how this is going to work out, Josh Allen. Mariota is third on that list behind two guys who are known for absolutely just chucking the ball, which is really not Mariota's game. Pitts himself has an average depth of target of over 15 yards. His average depth of target is 15.7 yards this year. The highest ever recorded in a season in our database is by a tight end is 12.6. So he is 3 yards of ADOT higher than the most ADOT tight end, which when you think about it means that he's going to be catching fewer balls because they're going to be deeper shots. They're going to be riskier.
Lower probability completions.
Exactly, yeah. And when you think about tight ends, it's the stuff in the middle. It's the safety valve stuff. That's not how they're using him at all. And so when I kind of went and looked this up, there's only ever been one player since 2018 who caught 70 passes with an ADOT that deep. There's only 4 players who caught 50 passes with an ADOT that deep. So if they're using him in this sort of deep ball role, he's just not going to catch very many balls, and you're going to be dependent on those weeks where he booms and gets a couple deep shots and a touchdown. So I agree with you that as much like I like what I'm seeing from the Falcons as a sort of neutral observer, but as someone who's invested in Pitts, I'm really, really not liking what I'm seeing.
Compare him to an elite. You mentioned the usage of a general tight end, and it might sound like 15 ADOT. I mean, that means high ceiling. If he does catch some of these, which we saw in week 3, you could have those games, and I think no matter what, he will have weeks like that. But that means the floor is really low because they're lower probability. And this isn't Aaron Rodgers throwing 10 yards down the field on average. This is Marcus Mariota, so his accuracy is not going to be as good. It's going to be a little bit more scattered. But look at the way that the Chiefs use Travis Kelce. Mahomes is not throwing him 15 yards down the field. He's throwing those kind of like 7 to 9 yard, and then Kelce will do yards after catch. Kittle kind of has that same kind of profile. Mark Andrews in Baltimore. So the fact that Pitts is being used more like a deep threat wide receiver, yes, we'll probably see a week where he probably finishes his tight end win just because he catches one of those for a long touchdown. But that means the floor is really low, and that's a problem. So I love this question. I love the advanced stats. Check out Stathead for exactly this reason. I'm going to pivot now to let's talk a little bit about buy low candidates. Buy low meaning there's somebody on another roster that you think you can get at a good price, a price below his value. Who are you kind of targeting for buy low targets right now?
That's a really great question. I've been looking at some stuff. I have Christian McCaffrey on my roster, and he has not performed, exactly how I hoped, considering where I had to draft him. But watching the games, he seems pretty healthy. The sense I get from kind of what's happening there is it's more of like a funky offense not working right thing. But he's someone who I would like, just thinking about myself emotionally, like I would probably accept like a lesser offer right now. Just as advice to the people out there, I think that he might be a decent buy low candidate.
So that's interesting. I think that's the first time somebody on the show has given their own like candidate as maybe a sell high and turned him into a buy low. Like, guys, buy low for me. I want to get rid of CMC. Take note. That's awesome.
I don't know if this is like a traditional fit for a buy low candidate because quarterback is so loaded. But I was looking at Russell Wilson's numbers, and I don't like what I've seen from him eye test wise. But these are the drop percentages, the wide receiver drop percentages for him for the last 5 years: 4.6, 3.4, 5.1, 4.1, 8.7. So this year he's nearly 9% of his passes are being recorded as drops by the wide receivers. So if you're looking for optimism, or if you can get Russell Wilson as a throw-in in a trade, I think that there's some bad luck that may bounce back his way. I wouldn't go out of my way to like trade for him, but if you're negotiating with someone and you're looking for a little extra value to put that trade over the top for you, see if they'll throw in Russ. Why not?
I love that. I mean, quarterback's one of those positions, like he's getting the opportunities. He's got great weapons. It just hasn't quite materialized. So I like that as a buy low candidate. I like George Pickens. And you probably can't get him in Dynasty, so this is really more of a redraft. But if somebody who maybe did draft him, and maybe after the catch last week, just had his first 100-yard game, but the reason I like him is the reason he had that 100-yard game is Kenny Pickett is throwing to him. He actually beat Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool handily in target share against the Jets. In Pickett's first game, he comes in, he starts immediately throwing. I think it was 6 of 8 targets that Pickens caught for 100 yards. The best is only yet to come. We saw what he could do in the preseason, and Pickett, that seems to be his favorite target. So I like that as a buy low candidate. We have a start-sit question in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and bring that up. Connor Anthony says, I have Breece Hall, Drake London, Tyler Lockett. Pretty good depth there. Who should I be starting at flex in the upcoming week?
That's a really great question. I would probably, let's see. I'm a little nervous about Breece Hall. I feel like a lot of his value came from the Flacco checkdowns. I'm not sure kind of going forward if he's going to maintain that hot start. We were talking about the Falcons passing game and kind of concerns there, but honestly, they're both doing better than Tyler Lockett. So I feel like you can't really go wrong. My sense is always, I always kind of defer to the running back in this situation. So I probably would go with Breece Hall. I think he's going to get the most usage. I think he's going to get the most touches out of the three. But Drake London, I'd be tempted, but the Falcons passing game is just so in flux right now. Same deal with Lockett. Actually, Geno's been really good this season by some of the advanced numbers. He leads the league in on-target rate. He has the best one we've seen since Drew Brees in 2018. I don't know if he's going to keep that up, but either way, that hasn't really translated into much production for Tyler Lockett so far. So I think of the three, I'm riding with Breece. But what about you?
Yeah, I'm leaning that way. What I was doing, I was looking up the schedule for each team. So I knew that the Jets played the Dolphins, my Dolphins, which isn't a great matchup, maybe from a pass perspective, because I do think that Jets defense will allow quite a bit of points to that Miami offense, even with Teddy Bridgewater in there. I actually think Teddy Bridgewater is tailor-made for an offense like that, kind of that San Francisco 49ers yards after catch, just an accurate quarterback, get the ball out and let Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle get yards after catch. So I do think the Jets are going to be playing from behind. Falcons are playing the Buccaneers. That's in Tampa Bay. So there could be opportunity there. I do think that's a game where Tampa Bay bounces back. So I do think London could have some interesting opportunities there. Tyler Lockett, the Seahawks, I think, are going to come down to earth. They're playing the Saints. And I think the reason why that Seahawks offense did so well is because they were playing the worst defense in the NFL right now in Detroit. So I would eliminate Lockett. Now I'm looking at Hall or London. That secondary at Tampa Bay is very good. The Chiefs were able to do a lot from the tight end position. Maybe this is a Kyle Pitts game, so I'm with you. I'm going to lean Breece Hall because he is clearing away now, getting the opportunities, getting the goal line opportunities, getting the opportunities out of the backfield. He is a much bigger share in the backfield than Michael Carter right now, where it started the opposite. So I think Breece Hall is the clear RB1. So yeah, I'm going with Hall there. All right, just over 2 minutes left. Go ahead and throw another question at me.
I guess I'll keep it simple. Through 4 weeks, who's your pick for like the big league winner? The Cooper Kupp or a player like that who maybe people got at a bit of a discount, who now looks like he's going to swing a lot of fantasy titles.
So I have a question like this. I'm gonna pivot slightly. I was gonna ask you who's your favorite fantasy player this year, meaning on your team, meaning a player that you drafted that is you just I love that guy. I love watching him every week. And I'm gonna say Romeo Doubs. I was big on him over George Pickens in the preseason because not a talent thing, but because I just thought the opportunity was there. It was wide open for the taking for a receiver to fill that Devontae Adams role in Green Bay. And now we've seen Dobbs score touchdowns in multiple weeks. He dropped one. He would have had 2 touchdowns this past week. That's what Rodgers has been looking for. He's showing to trust him more and more. He had 8 catches the week before, so he's getting the targets. He's got the talent, and he's got an elite quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. So I think if you don't already have Dobbs, or if Dobbs is on your bench, like that's the guy who he's only going to get more opportunities to work with Aaron Rodgers. He could be the one who really lifts your team. And chances are you drafted him really late if it's redraft. Even in my rookie dynasty, I was getting him in the 4th round. So because, we're doing drafts in like May. So that's who I like, Romeo Doubs. Do you have a guy that's kind of who's your favorite, or who's the guy you think could be a league winner for you?
Dobbs is a great pick. I feel like every year there's the training buzz guys and they never work out. And it's cool to see one of these actually coming together, especially with Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. I've been happy with Clyde Edwards-Helaire so far.
CEH, surprising, yeah.
I know it's been a hard fought run up the fantasy table, but he's delivering pretty well. I love having Chiefs on my team just because I like an excuse to watch them. But honestly, he's been really good, and it's not quite as under the radar. But I got Saquon in the 2nd round. Very happy with how that has turned out.
Saquon might be the real answer to that question. Like, who's the league winner? If you got Saquon Barkley in the 2nd round, he is the number 1 running back in fantasy. He's going to lead you to the championship if he stays healthy. That gong means we have made it to the end of the game. I don't say this enough, guys, but if you're listening or watching, please subscribe. We're doing this 5 days a week. We've got a week recap on Mondays with a preview of the Monday Night Football game. We've got Fantasy Tuesdays. Tomorrow we have our live Power Rankings draft with Jimmy Ray of the NFL Stats Twitter account. That happens at 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific. You can see us. We do it draft style. We take turns, so our rankings might be different, but the rankings we release afterwards are based on the draft that we take turns doing. Thursday, we're going to take more live viewer questions. If you guys have start-sit questions like these, preview Thursday Night Football. And Friday, we're doing our game picks against the spread. So 5 days a week coming at you live. Please subscribe, do all that stuff so that you can support us and enjoy the content that we're working so hard to put out there for you. Sign up for Legit Football. Jonah, any last words for the listeners and viewers here?
Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thanks for having me, Brian. This was great. Again, if you want to see those advanced stats, head over to Stathead. You can try it for free for a month, which is going to be, this is the perfect time to do it. This is, when your fantasy season can really be swung one way or the other. You want to be looking at those stats. Certainly, if you're making picks against the spread, if you're working on gambling angles, all of that stuff, or if you just like watching football and learning more about it, these advanced stats are really cool. They really helped me learn a lot more about kind of how to analyze the game and how to understand what I'm seeing. So definitely take a look and give it a try for free for a month. It's stathead.com. But otherwise, thanks again for having me, Brian, and thanks for watching. I love doing this. This was really fun.
Well, Jonah, I always love having you on. We'll definitely have you on again. Thanks for joining me today. Guys, don't forget, tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, if you want to watch our Power Rankings draft live. I think we're pretty clear who's number 1, but there's a lot of other teams that are going to be jumbled. We're happy to have you disagree with us. Thank you for listening and watching. This has been 30 Minutes of Football with Legit Football. We'll see you guys tomorrow. That's spicy. Jimmy Garoppolo on there could be a benefit, but have they kind of burned that bridge?
We'll say this. Gardner Minshew is the best backup in the NFL.
I love Gardner.